Welcome to The Lock Shop with Nielsen and Hustler, powered by Coolbet Canada.
What's up, Lock Shoppers and Cool Betters, EST listeners? It's Lock Shop time. CFL is back tonight. Great matchup with the return of Chad Kelly and the Argos hosting the Saskatchewan Roughriders. We're going to get to all of that. Busy day here in the Peg, and WST is going to be nuts coming up in an hour with the Rutger McGroaty trade just being announced. 1-for-1 for Brayden Yager, the star of the Moose Jaw Warriors, who won the WHL championship. So for those of you in the Winnipeg area that want your Jets fixed, join us coming up about in an hour. But before we get into CFL picks and everything else, let me welcome in the big brain himself, Matthew Iwanyk.
Haas, how are you?
What a performance. The bully of the poker tourney. Incredible performance, Iwanyk. That was something else. What a fun night we had a couple nights ago, first and foremost. That was a blast.
Oh, it was great. I really enjoyed it. It's only, I think, the second poker tournament I've ever done before. First online one I've ever done. It was a lot of fun. I don't know. It's exciting. And there were times where I didn't understand what some people were doing and helped me win some chips. I think when you're at the table, like a couple of hands I won, people folded on the last, I forgot what they're all called, but when the fifth card was flipped. I just would put some chips in and they folded. I was like, well, cool. Just give me the whole pot. I didn't really have much here, but I've already put in a bunch of money, so I don't care. I'll just go and see what else everyone has. But it was a lot of fun, and I was able to take out a few people, and to be at the break close to the end of the final table, 9 players left and having the most chips. It was a nice feeling. Your boy Remus took me out though, and he had a nice little tournament, but to be able to gloat around the EST offices saying I was number one in Edmonton at least, I will take that all day.
Dusty did thank Remus yesterday. He said, listen, we would not have been able, Matt would have been so insufferable if he had taken that whole thing down. But hey, you did. You are the king. You are the king of EST, very clearly. And Remus, I will say for the record, was very sheepish about the way he took you out because you did have the better hand.
Yeah.
And he rivered you hard on that last card. So that's the way it was. But again, thanks to everybody that jumped in with us. We had an absolute blast. We'll look forward to doing more throughout the season. But it was a heck of a start. And keep your eyes out for more info on that coming up as we move into hockey season and more. Yeah, there's Mark Amph, Winnipeg Jets trade. Let's go. Matt Hyman, Hustler, initial thoughts on Brayden Yager. Like I said, I'm going to save most of my bullets for WST, but I will say this is if the Jets were going to move off of Rutger McGroaty, who was such an exciting prospect, they needed to do it for a player of similar age, team control, and potential and upside. And Brayden Yager is that guy. We had heard Grant McKegg was on our program, heading into the previous draft in Nashville, and said that he thought that the Winnipeg Jets would be very interested in Brayden Yager. He had another amazing season last year. He played 57 games, 35 goals, 95 points. And then in the playoffs, 20 games, 16 for 27, winning the Memorial Cup. And here's the other thing. And again, you'll get this, Matt. We're here in Western Canada. The Jets have gone down the American road a lot. And listen, I'm a guy, and I know that their philosophy is don't worry about the passport. Get the best player. But, you know, like Trouba leaving the way that he did, and then this business with Rutger McGroaty, which has really seemed like major entitlement, kind of trying to force their way into the lineup before earning it. I know that trading what is perceived to be an entitled American player for a Western Canadian kid that just led his team to a championship will go over quite well with fans. So we'll see what happens. This is the guy they obviously wanted. They were holding it out. And I mean, a unique trade too, Matt, in that this is a 1-for-1 deal with two guys that have not played yet in the National Hockey League. Both seem to be very much ready. Drafted back-to-back 14th overall in consecutive drafts.
Well, yeah, that's what Penner's Pancakes has in the Nasty Chat. He goes, both players picked 14th overall a year apart. So it comes down to who turns out. So a solid trade with that. But like there does come a point teams need to start looking a little bit more at passports, especially the American one. I recall this as a stat from a couple of years ago. Don't know how much it has changed, but it wouldn't have changed much. But for a large period of time, if you just looked at free agency, Americans do not sign up in Canada. Americans do not sign free agent deals to come up play in Canada. So, you know, there is a risk as a Canadian franchise drafting an American, even if they play their full contract with you, even if they play many years with you, the moment they have the chance to become an unrestricted free agent, the chances are rather higher based on the precedent that we've seen over the last few years is that they're going to leave, that they're going to go out. And that's if they don't even get asked for the trade prior. So, you know, sometimes it is, I get the rationale of teams going, we got to draft the best player available. But sometimes it's like, yeah, but you could take the best player available, but if they ask for a trade, you always get the best value for them when they ask for that trade.
You know,
no.
I get
and so
that.
here's a nice one. Like this works out for Winnipeg again because there's similar players and similar stories in that. And as you said, both ready to go. But I think there does come a point where it's almost if you're certain teams, like I would say Winnipeg and Edmonton, Calgary would be in there, Ottawa would have to be in there. If you see a Canadian, but there's another player that's relatively close, take that other player because you might have a little bit more headaches with the American.
Yeah, and again, and this is somewhat unique just because the Jets have been so heavy and have drafted so many U.S. players. But listen, for every Rutger McGroaty, and like the Jacob Trouba thing, I think was a little misconstrued. We know now, I mean, he was getting married to a woman who was going to be doing her whatever they call it, internship or whatever, when they become, the work in the hospital in New York City, and was very clear that, you know, that's where he was going to be going when he had the opportunity. But for every McGroaty, we've had Kyle Connor. And when you look at the Jets, they extended Buff. They extended Blake Wheeler twice. They extended Kyle Connor. Sure. So, I mean, they actually have done a very good job at maintaining those prospects. But I mean, again, things change and maybe things are a little different today than they were 10 years ago. But the bottom line is they had a mess on their hands. And this was a guy that, like, I haven't seen a fan base get as excited about a player like Rutger McGroaty since Patrick Laine got drafted. And part of it was just his personality. I mean, he would come on our show and he'd be like, I cannot wait to be a Winnipeg Jet. Blah, like, I mean, I think a lot of it was the guy's great with the media and he's great in front of a microphone. Obviously, there was a lot of bullshit being thrown out around as well. But I think this is a lot about the people around him as well. So anyways, we wish him well. But Brayden Yager's coming to Winnipeg and we're going to be all over it. Ken Weep's going to join us on the program today. We'll hopefully have somebody else that maybe was following those guys in junior hockey last year. So the chat's going to be going crazy today. That much I can guarantee.
Jake Bulamaw saying not Austin Matthews in the nasty chat. Not Austin Matthews yet. I'll throw that out there. Not Austin Matthews yet. He's going to LA. He's going to LA. I'm sorry to say it, but he's going to LA.
Yeah, well, we've got another 5 years to you got another 5 years to think about that
until they ask for the trade in 2 years from now because they're not winning playoff series.
Well, see,
Edmonton and Toronto, we always take the shots come from both markets.
I'm a guy that always loves to take a shot at the Leafs, like everybody. I will say this was long overdue, and I think this actually has a real tangible benefit for the Leafs and
captaincy
certainly for Austin Matthews. Yeah. I really do. Like, I think that, put it this way, I'm higher on the Leafs now than I was 2 weeks ago when Austin Matthews wasn't the captain. I mean, the guy is an absolute superstar. He now understands what's involved with being the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's got his new contract. It's time to go out and win and make something happen in the playoffs. And obviously, their team's a little different this year. There's a whole bunch that goes into it, but I'm buying Austin Matthews for the next few years, and I think that's going to be good for the Toronto Maple Leafs. What happens to his buddy Mitch? That's another story entirely. But it is funny just on that before we get to CFL. Like, it seems like so long ago, but you remember the Leafs bowing out of the playoffs and the conversation around Toronto and everyone that it's basically a fait accompli. I mean, they're breaking this up. You can't you can't run it back again with this core four. And
we're running it back again.
I think they tried to do some things with Mitch. He's not down with it. He's got the one more year. But you do wonder, do they just let him walk for nothing and use that cap space elsewhere? Or do they find a way to bring him back and then just try and keep on doing better with the same guys? I don't know. But Matthews is the captain, I think, is a great move for the organization. Tavares isn't the guy that he once was. And Tavares, I don't know. We'll see whether Austin Matthews is more of sort of a fiery leader, because he seemed like a more of a quiet guy. And I think they could get more out of him with a little bit more energy, passion, emotion. And hopefully this brings it out for him if you're a Leaf fan.
That's the problem, though, of all these no move clause, no trade clause that NHL GMs have thrown out there. That, like, it was even one of those at points when you looked at the Oilers last year when things weren't good. Like, you go, there's not a lot that you could change with this team because the top guys, they've got the no moves or the no trade clauses. There's discussion this year about Evander Kane. Could the Oilers move on from him? Well, he has no move clause until March 1st next year. It becomes a no trade clause with a 16-team no trade list or something like that. The Leafs, if it wasn't for those no trade clause, no move clauses, they probably would have liked to have done something this offseason. They just couldn't because everyone has that no trade clause or no move clause, and you can't move on from them. Also, Jake, well played. Don't worry, Connor will be here in 2 years anyways. He adds in the nasty chat. So. Well played, Jake.
That's the other side of Leaf fans. The entitlement, the smugness. Are you kidding me? Anyway, so we've got a lot of hockey to talk about today, which will get people fired up just while we're having this conversation, let's just, we're getting close to training camps right now. Let's take a look at these Stanley Cup odds right now. Now that the Oilers, the dust has settled on the offer sheet saga of the last week. And the Cup finalists last year are the top two favorites. But the Edmonton Oilers are the Stanley Cup favorite right now, plus 680. And I'll be honest, I have not been going back and forth and checking it as much as, really over the last couple months. I thought they were maybe 6 plus 650 before. Maybe that's gone up slightly because they lost Holloway and Broberg, which is interesting. To be honest, well, I'll ask you your thoughts on this too, Matt, just before we get to the CFL games. But I really thought that the Oilers, they were put in a tough situation. It was entirely avoidable and it was entirely their own doing. So they sort of got themselves into this mess. And it is unfortunate for the long term. I mean, you don't like losing first round picks. Mm-hmm. And with a team as old as the Oilers are, I think in like 2 years ago, in 2 years from now, you might say, man, we really miss those guys. But for a team that's window is right now to win the Stanley Cup, they're going to be fine with a very mid blue line for the first half of the year. The way that they've worked this out with the potential to gain significant cap space with Evander Kane's LTIR because they're not over, mm-hmm. and the ability to add with those picks as well, 1 or 2 players on the blue line, maybe even more. Although, man, like just with the Henrique and Arvidsson, I mean, how much room do they have? Guys get hurt. Maybe they'll need more. I think the Oilers, I'll make the argument that the Oilers are better suited to win the Cup this year right now than they were a couple weeks ago. I do wonder, though, what that means for them in 2 or 3 years when those guys would be technically still under team control, playing for maybe lesser contracts and being big contributors.
Yeah, and then that's the risk that you're always going to have, what comes down the line. But, if the Edmonton Oilers could snag a Stanley Cup or two before then, no one's going to care as much. I think you probably word it best that, yeah, they might be more suited to go and on that run with what they can now do at the deadline for next year.
The cap flexibility is massive.
But now it comes down to, can they execute that? Can they go execute around that deadline, in advance of that deadline, at the deadline, getting the right players to fully put this team over the top, where maybe you go and add that top 4 defenseman that the Oilers seem to always lead, on the right-hand top 4 defenseman, to play with Darnell Nurse. And maybe then another depth defenseman to fill out and round out that top 6. And then potentially have Evander Kane come back from LTI, or if he's healthy, if he could play as the playoff performer that he's done in the past, what an addition that would be, and that would really set them off. But it's about finding those right players, and it's going to come down to Jeff Jackson and Stan Bowman finding that defenseman that no one is thinking of, like the Mattias Ekholm from a couple of years ago. No one was talking about Mattias Ekholm. Then all of a sudden, boom, Ken Holland saying Mattias Ekholm's an Edmonton Oiler. You look at the list of unrestricted free agents for next year on defense; it's not that great actually. And so it's going to come down to, are they going to be able to find that defenseman that does put this team over the top? But everything you said there, I stand by, I agree with, and I think it's probably worded it perfectly. For position-wise to get set up for that Stanley Cup run, yeah, I'd agree. The Oilers are in a better spot today than they were a couple weeks ago, because losing CC, Broberg, and Holloway does not make this team missing the playoffs. Does it hurt them a little bit this year? Absolutely. They lost 2 of the 6 defensemen that they're planning to go into the season with. But they now, with that, the cap, that changes everything. And it's one of the things I just don't understand how NHL GMs haven't realized. The idea of holding on to cap space is actually so valuable. This year we saw the first significant jump in the cap in a number of years. And what did the GMs do on free agency? They spent it. Where it's like, well, maybe don't spend that extra $2-3 million on certain players and go into the season with cap, because the teams that have the cap space, they could do a little bit more. And it's even just, the Lightning last year were part of a trade with the Oilers and the Ducks for Henrik and Carrick, where they got a draft pick out of it because they retained a little bit of salary. Maybe while the Oilers are doing everything next trade deadline, they could retain an extra $750,000, $800,000 for a player and gain a pick out of that, because they have that flexibility to do it. Like, all of that extra stuff you get from it, more teams need to realize and learn that cap space is so important. The Oilers are in a cup run, cup season, cup or bust, but not spending all that cap might actually help them to get that cup than spending it right now today. If you're Jeff Jackson, Stan Bowman.
Everyone wants everything right away. And I know it was hilarious hearing all the A+ that were given out to Jeff Jackson saying, we don't need a GM. We've got our guy. But I'll give Bowman credit. I think they put themselves in a situation, albeit sort of at gunpoint from St. Louis, and not the way they really wanted it to go. But given the situation that they're in, they've got cap flexibility. They've got the ability to add. They've got a few more assets to do it, at least amongst draft picks, which is normally the currency that's made in those deals. And hell, it'll give you guys a lot to talk about on EST as far as who's going to be who. Like, the defense trade targets is going to be a daily segment on the Nielsen show, on the Hangout. So it'll be all good. Let's get to the CFL. Oh, and yes. I see Jake Boland-Moss. I'll be down at BMO tonight cheering on my Riders. Jake, down with the Riders. Well, hey, speaking of that, Brett Lothner's got to have a big comeback game. I think the Riders do actually have a big comeback game. I'm high out. Well, what do you think, just before we get to, and by the way, this game right now, we'll tee this up. I should have mentioned this. Toronto is now 2-point favorites over Saskatchewan. The money line is minus 143 for the Argos. It's plus 118 for the Riders. The Riders getting 2 points. I don't want to pump my tires, but I mean, the whole last couple of days we've been talking about, I said, I like Saskatchewan in this spot. I'm not convinced on Chad Kelly. We'll get your thoughts on this game in a second, Matt. But I was doing some mock fantasy drafts last night, and it was about 1 a.m. or so, and I went over onto Coolbet, and I saw the Riders were up to +3, which is a huge, I mean, the difference between 2.5 and 3 is so significant. So I'm like, okay, I have to get on this now. So I am in on the Riders +3. The money line at the time was +135. So that's come down a little bit. It's quite clear that there's some Saskatchewan money coming in right now. The Argos still are the favorite. Should the Argos still be the favorite, Matt? Because they haven't looked particularly good over the last little while. And I mean, listen, we saw what Nathan Rourke did with 2 or 3 practices to get ready. Like, let's not forget that Chad Kelly has not been with the team through this first half of the season. He has not been practicing. He hasn't been with there. Now, it is a little different. He was with most of these guys last year. He's coming back to his team. But is it – I don't know. I think the Argos they could win this game for sure, but I think this should maybe be close. Like, if Chad Kelly wasn't in, the Riders would be favored for sure, I think. I mean, based on what we've seen so far this week. And don't be fooled by last week's game and the loss at home to Montreal. I mean, they were -17 on the kicking game. I mean, that was just one of those things that happens once in a season. They deserve to win that game, and that was against Montreal, who's 9-1 right now. What are your expectations for Chad Kelly? Not big picture tonight against a heck of a defense in Saskatchewan that's going to be in a pissed off mood considering what happened last week against the Alouettes.
Well, considering he's not my quarterback in my fantasy football league, I'm expecting a lot of great things. I get the cautionary tale we got from Nathan Rourke last weekend that, here's a guy that came in, threw his 2 picks, but also full credit to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers defense because he came into the Canadian Football League after not being in the Canadian Football League for a year and a half and went up against probably the hottest defense right now in the CFL. That is a defense that has been rolling through a number of games with a shutout to the BC Lions and 6 points allowed against the Toronto Argonauts defensively. Like, that is a very good defense and a tough way to come into the CFL. Whereas I think you had it there with Chad Kelly. He was with this team last year. Like, he knows these players. He knows what Ryan Dinwiddie wants. And yes, Nathan Rourke was part of Rick Campbell's team a couple of years ago, but that's, he hasn't had a lot of game time over the last year and a half, Nathan Rourke. Like, he's had a little bit of preseason time, but Chad Kelly played last season. Like, he was playing full football games last season. So I'm expecting a better performance from Chad Kelly in terms of, what we're going to see and shaking off the rust as opposed to Nathan Rourke. I look at this game and look at the Toronto Argonauts. They've improved a lot. Chad Kelly's an idiot. Chad Kelly is a moron. We know that. He constantly, every stop he's gone, he's done stupid things. But on the football field, he's an excellent quarterback. He's an excellent guy, and he could lead a team. And he's also got those legs that can help do some things. He rushed for a fair amount of touchdowns last year. I look at a few things with the Riders. One, the way they lost the game, they almost had the Alouettes. That either could just send your season off completely in the one direction because you're just like, well, we just don't have it. Or maybe it motivates this team going, we almost had them. It's time. We're behind Brett Lawler. We're going to get this done. But they've lost 5 of their last 6 games. This is a team that has been struggling mightily, and they're going up against an Argos team that is looking for the first time since 2004, sweeping all the West teams at home. They have a record of 4-1 at home this season. They're good at home. I'm expecting, this usually is because it's the night where the exhibition is happening. So your ticket to the exhibition gets you to the Argos game or vice versa, something like that. This is generally their highest attended game type throughout the season.
The CNE is on, yes.
The CNE. Yes. So you're going to have a better crowd for the Argos as well. I just think there's a lot in favor for the Toronto Argonauts to go win this football game. They find ways to win at home, even though they shouldn't sometimes against the Bombers. They shouldn't have beat the Bombers, but they found a way to still get that victory. So I'm with, if I saw 3, or I would be liking the Riders to cover that. I think this is a close game. I think this does come down to a field goal, but because it's right now at -2, well, so yeah, so I'm just trying to, it's been a couple weeks since I've been on with you. So the Riders could lose by 2 or more. So yeah, I would have to take the Riders, I think, to. No, I think the Argos win by 3. So yeah, if the Argos are going to win by 3, they cover.
You're gonna.
So yes,
okay, we're on.
I'm with that one. Yeah. So I'd have to just.
I'm taking the Riders
right
to
now.
win.
But I like the Argos to win this. I think if it was +3, yes, I'd probably be more on the Riders side. But now it's -2. I'm sticking with the Argos because they win at home.
Yeah, and just let's look at these Riders games over the last where they've been right now. It's so funny.
So they lost last week to the Owls 27-24. They tied. Well, I guess, yeah, so they haven't won 5 of 6. I forgot there was a tie, 22-22. Lost to the Elks 42-31 in a game that actually flattered the Riders in that score. They lost to the Owls 20-16. They beat the Bombers 19-9, and then they lost to the Lions 35-20. That's their last 6.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, you look at those games. I mean, that they played well or wait a second, sorry, I'm looking at last year's games. They did beat the Argos earlier this year in what was a good game. That was one of the better games for Dukes all season.
No, Dukes threw 2 picks in that game. The Riders' defense was all over Cameron Dukes in that game. Yeah,
well, did he have like a ton of rushing yards? I mean, that was like early. I think that was the opening week of the season, if I recall correctly. The June that was July 4th.
They played, so they
had a couple.
That was week 4.
Yeah, they beat the Elks and then 2 against the Ticats. So we were like, okay, how good is this team? I was just really impressed honestly, really impressed with the way they looked last week against Montreal. If they play like that way against just about anybody, I think they'll win. And I mean, Trevor Harris, he was the top quarterback last week, didn't get the win for the reasons that we talked about. So anyways, a lot of attention on Chad Kelly, a lot of pressure on Chad Kelly. We'll see what he can get done, but this is going to be an ornery Sask team. I'm in on Sask tonight, so we're on different sides. I like the money line as well, plus 118. I think Saskatchewan gets this win. The Bomber game. So 2 days ago when these lines came out, this was 7.5 for the Bombers. And I said to folks, well, listen, if you're in the Winnipeg area and you want to slam the Bombers, do it now. Because this line is not going the other way. And it went all the way to 10 the next day. It's settled at 9.5. So essentially, the question is, will the Bombers win by double digits? We know the way Winnipeg's playing right now, in particular this defense, which is put together, 106 minutes of shutout football against Vernon Adams and Nathan Rourke. I mean, it's incredible. And dating back to their last 4 games have been lights out. I mean, giving up 19 in Saskatchewan when the Bomber offense wasn't doing much at all was the start of it. The 6 points against Toronto in that crazy game that they managed to lose. But these performances against BC have been just absolute masterpieces. And Hamilton seems to be in complete disarray on both sides of the football right now, Matt. Your old pal, Chris Jones, though, is now on the sidelines of the Ticats. I don't think it matters at all this week, to be perfectly frank. To be frank on this. And listen, that earlier, if this was last year, for instance, and Hamilton was coming in at 2-8, and the Bombers were where they were, I could see the Bombers maybe playing down to their opponent a little bit. We have seen that in the past, finding a way to win, but not covering the spread, whatever, move on to next week. They have no such wiggle room anymore with what happened at the start of the year, the 0-4 start, falling to 2-6. And if they're not at their best, they need to be on their best for a couple weeks. First of all, you got to get this win. They've got to get more out of the offense right now. And I think Hamilton might be a perfect opponent to put up a big offensive game with Kenny Lawler back for another one and to start getting rolling heading to Saskatchewan, where the offense is going to need to go up a level or two if they're going to want to win that game in Regina. So I think that they'll be incredibly focused, more than they might have been if they were 8-1 hosting the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And I guess on the other side of things, we're going to talk about this with Marsh later on today when he's on the show with us, but hard to get excited about anything involving Hamilton. I mean, it went from bad to worse, and the humiliation they got at the hands of the Elks last week at home had to be rock bottom. No matter what, you could lose 50-0 to the Bombers this week, and it won't be as bad as being down 32-3 at halftime to the Elks last week. But I mean, is there any reason to think that the Hamilton Tiger Cats will be in this game and can keep it to single digits?
The only reason is you thought the opposite there, but are the Bombers going to be looking ahead to the Labor Day with Saskatchewan? Like, is this that trap game where they look at the Ticats, look at what happened to them against the Elks, and goes, we've got this, and that allows the Ticats to lose by 5 points, 7 points or something like that. I'm not going to say the Bombers are going to lose this football game, but that would be the only argument I have. Chris Jones, I think Chris Jones is a great defensive coordinator. You cannot take that away from him. It's too soon for him to make an impact with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. He just got there this week. If we're going to see a change defensively from the Ticats, that's 3-4 weeks away still. So you can't look at that. Offensively, I'm not going to guess that Scott Milanovic and Bo Levi Mitchell are necessarily on the right footing between each other with him getting benched last week, but he now has to play because Powell's hurt. James Butler is a healthy scratch for the second straight week, although Bell had a really good game against Edmonton last week. But it's also like, to your point of what happened last week to Edmonton, it was just 3 weeks prior that the Ticats came into Edmonton and rolled the Elks. And for how much that franchise, they had won 2 straight after that because they beat Toronto the week prior to that. Things were looking good for Hamilton. And to go from that, a 2-game win streak, to just utter dysfunction, just to collapse in the span of 3 weeks, I don't know how you get prepared and get focused and get ready for a Winnipeg Blue Bombers defense. I don't care about the offense at this point, really. It's that Bombers defense that has gone out and has dominated. And that did it against, it's not like we're talking about their last 3 games again against, Edmonton and Hamilton and Calgary. Again, it was BC twice, and it was Toronto. So like that, I just don't know how that offense gets rolling. So like the only argument I could make maybe for Hamilton covering 9.5 is it's because the Bombers are just looking ahead to that Labor Day set. But I think the Bombers are too focused right now. They had their rough start to this season. They had their struggles to start to this season. They are now sitting there going, we're 2 points back of the BC Lions for second in the West. Who would have fully guessed that 4 weeks ago? So 9.5, I would go with the Bombers. It's a lot of points, but I think the Bombers do cover this. If the Elks could do it, the Bombers can. I'm
the same way. I usually will stay away from these big lines, but in this case, as I said, with 6 losses already on the season, this team cannot and will not overlook any opponent. I think we're going to see more of the same from the Blue Bomber defense, which is cooking. And this is going to be the game, I think, that we see a lot more explosiveness and finishing drives by this Bomber offense. So I know Dusty's on his way to the peg. It is going to be we got over 30K as well. I think they're doing 90s night tomorrow, so it'll be a big party. See what the weather's looking like right now for the game. I think it's going to be pretty darn nice. We've got 26 and sunny. How's that for 30,000 of your closest friends? 26 and sunny. Bombers on a roll to get ready. And by the way, here's just a little aside. Mike O'Shea just won his 100th game with the Bombers on the weekend. The legendary Bud Grant, who has a statue of himself, is the all-time leader in coaching wins for the Bombers with 102. If the Bombers can get this win tonight, it's 101. And then it's the back-to-back against Saskatchewan. And again, there's a lot of ifs in this, but if they could win the Labor Day Classic, he would tie Bud Grant and have the opportunity to become the winningest coach in Blue Bomber history at home against their arch rival Riders in the Banjo Bowl. That's, I guess, the one silver lining of the start. We might be able to put together a very special run right now. That being said, I'm in on the Riders tonight. I think they'll be good, and that game next week should be absolutely phenomenal. Maybe the most interesting game of the week, and it's certainly the closest line, is BC at Ottawa. And the poor Red Blacks, they are 6-2-1. They continue to find ways to win. Amazing comeback in the second half last week. Jeremiah Masoli, just what a great story that was. And they're still home dogs against a team that's lost 4 in a row with a quarterback that came back to the NFL and looked completely out of it last week in Nathan Rourke. This earlier in the week was basically a pick'em. BC is still a 1-point favorite. What's been interesting is seeing what's happened with the money line. And you got to lay -125 on BC. Ottawa's even money at home. I just kind of laid out why Ottawa continues to sort of be overlooked and somewhat disrespected. And you can see the same thing right now in the CFL futures. I mean, Ottawa is 8-1 behind Toronto, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, BC, and Montreal. I think I'm still taking BC in this game, though. I think Nathan Rourke's going to feel so much pressure. And listen, a full week of practice, getting some reps in, he should be better. And the BC Lions should be better. I mean, we've seen them look so much more. I mean, what happened in the last two games against Winnipeg, first with VA and Rourke, was incredible. But, I mean, the other two games were close that they lost. But, I mean, this is an important time for them to snap out of it, turn it around. Very big game for BC. I think Rourke will be better. I think they have enough to get to get the win. But I'll tell you what, this is a tough pick. Like, Ottawa is no joke. And you can ask the 6 teams that they beat so far this season already about the Ottawa Redblacks. You got to earn that win. I just think we'll see an urgent, a desperate BC team that'll be very focused, very prepared. And I think Nathan Rourke looks a lot better this week than he did last week against the Bombers.
Yeah,
Brown back Redblacks as well.
Yeah, you have to expect Nathan Rourke's not going to be what he was last week. That there is going to be improvement. We were all excited about Nathan Rourke coming back to the Canadian Football League because of what we saw, and he's an excellent quarterback. So there would have to be that improvement by the Lions. Also, like, the Lions need to get a win here. If they want to be considered the favorite in the West, they want a home playoff date in a year that they're hosting the Grey Cup, they've got to get out of this slide that they're in of 4 straight losses. They got Ottawa back-to-back weeks here. But there's a scenario here. If they lose this week, all of a sudden they're sitting behind the Bombers, I think. Would it be? Yeah, they would be behind the Bombers because of the tiebreaker, because the Bombers beat them twice. They would be also potentially, we don't, like, let's say the Elks go beat Montreal, and we'll get to the Elks and, Als right away here. But also, the Elks are only 2 points back of you. And the Elks actually home the season series against the BC Lions. Like, all of a sudden, looking at first, you also could be looking at 5th in the CFL West. You got to start getting some wins if you're Rick Campbell, Nathan Rourke, and the BC Lions. So
BC's lost the season series to both Winnipeg and Edmonton.
Yeah, because they played Edmonton. Edmonton won by a bigger margin. Yeah, and they don't play each other again this season. Yeah. So they, like, right there. Yeah, Bombers this weekend could be ahead of the BC Lions, and the Elks could at potentially. Now they have to go do some business against a tough opponent. But the Elks could also be sitting there after this week going, oh, we're only 2 points back of the BC Lions. And we've got the tiebreaker. Like, it's the Lions have to go start picking up their victories. And the benefit for them, to a degree, even though the standings say the East is stronger than the West, I'm still not fully sold completely on the East, all of it. I'm not sold on Toronto as much yet. Maybe Chad Kelly does change that. But BC's schedule after, I think they only have 2 games left against Western opponents. I think they have Calgary and Saskatchewan, if I'm not mistaken. But they're done with the West. It's all Eastern games they have here. But they got to go start picking up some victories. They got to go pick up some W's. And I would expect Nathan Rourke is going to have a better performance. So with the -1, I will take the BC Lions to win by, I think this is a close game, but I would take that -1 on the BC Lions.
All right. We're seeing this clearly. And we are now on the verge of, I think, a nice looking lock shop partner parlay for the weekend. Let's go to the final game. It's the Elks, the Red Hot Elks, and the class of the league, the Montreal Alouettes. Yeah. Alouettes get Cody Fajardo back. Yep. Alouettes add Austin Mack. Yep. Not sure how much he'll be in this first week back, but if he's out there, he's dangerous. This was 6.5. It's gone down to 6. MBT starting, right? Yeah, the Trey Ford's limited. I don't think he's going to dress for this game either. Shout out to Trey Ford, the second best forward in the CFL. Second best forward so far this season in his family, to be honest, right now. His twin brother's an absolute stud. Yeah. Number 1 ranked corner in the CFL week after week after week. I mean, we know quarterback is a much more important position, but this Ford, his brother, that not enough people outside of Winnipeg are talking about, is a huge part of what this Bomber defense has been going on. Anyways, I just thought I'd throw that in for a little bit of fun. But the Elks have a lot of momentum going on, but man, this is the toughest test. The best team on the road. Where are you at on this one? Can they well, never mind can they win. Is this going to be a game in the second half of the fourth quarter? Or are we going to be talking about the Elks being in it and, most importantly, covering this 6-point spread?
Well, look, this is a statement game for this football team. You know, you go out there and you go to Montreal and you get a win, and you win your fourth straight going into a September that involves 2 games against Calgary, 2 games against Winnipeg. You've sent a message around the Canadian Football League saying, you know, we're for real. We're this team now. We're not the team that started off 0-7. We're this team. You should be scared to have to take on the Edmonton Elks. These two teams met in the second week of the season where the Alouettes won by a field goal. Cody Fajardo was in that football game. MBT was the starter in that game, so they have shown with MBT as a starter that they could play these Alouettes very closely. I'm just not sold fully on the MBT offense. I'm not sold on what he can do. It comes down to, can the Elks continue this run attack that they've had over 2 weeks, that they did against Saskatchewan, that they did last week against Hamilton Tiger Cats. They don't have Javon Leake this weekend. It doesn't look like it's going to be Kevin Brown coming back in because Leake's injured, but they also have Justin Rankin, who's actually, it's been a 2-headed monster with Leake and Rankin over 2 weeks.
Awesome. I had no idea who he was, and I was looking at that game on Saturday. I'm like, who's this Rankin guy? He's everywhere.
I'm on with for Dusty tomorrow on the morning show. Justin Rankin's going to join us at 8:15 for anyone listening on Edmonton Sports Talk.
Nice.
But if they can get that run game going, then it opens things up a lot easier for MBT. And what they've shown over the last few weeks is they can get doing that. I struggle betting on MBT. I just struggle betting on him being the guy that carries this offense.
You're a Trey Ford truther.
Well, I'm the Trey Ford president of the Trey Ford fan club, and he has proven me correctly. And I'm also terrified that due to injury, he might be losing his starting job here. But because of how close they played Montreal last week, I do think that this Elks team is in a good spot. I think they will compete and challenge the Montreal Alouettes. I don't think they're going to win this football game, but I think they could keep it within a field goal. So if you're going to say the Edmonton Elks plus 6 points this weekend, I'm probably going to ride with the Elks on this one because the 2 factors I will clearly point, well, 3 factors, their run game, the fact that they're on a 3-game win streak, and because of that, their defense actually has been playing a lot better. They've gotten the spark that they need to go do their job. They've been creating turnovers, and the offense in itself has taken those turnovers and turned them into points. And the fact that there was a meeting between these 2 clubs earlier where it was Fajardo versus MBT, the Elks did keep it to 3 points. So I'm going to take the Elks plus 6.
I found this a tough pick to make, but I'm with you. I'm with you on the Elks.
It's a lot of points.
Listen, I think it is a lot of points. I think the team's looking much, much better. They're a lot like the Bombers. I mean, I think they need to come into every game feeling like it's almost a playoff game right now that they have to win. And as much as I respect what Montreal's done so far this year, I do think that there is the possibility of maybe a little bit of a let up. I didn't think they looked great last week. They were very fortunate to win, and shout out to Alexander for that great play at the end. But listen, they won because the Saskatchewan kicker had a rough game, and they were able to make a massive special teams play that was a 10-point difference in the game that ended up being the ultimate decider of it. But I do think that Montreal might be, I don't want to say comfortable, complacent, but listen, the Elks are going to be the hungry team in this game. So I'm with you. I'm taking the Elks plus 6. And this is great. We're on this. I've just texted Dusty, who's on his way to Winnipeg right now, and he's feeling the same way. Now, we actually could put together a 4-gamer, but I'm thinking that it probably makes more sense for us, especially with you being on the Argos. Mm-hmm. We'll leave the Thursday night game. As I say, bet it on its own, or you can go in and parlay it however you want with these other games. But we like the Bombers -5. We like BC
minus,
and we like Edmonton
9.5.
Pardon me? Yeah, 9.5. Sorry, what did I say?
5.
Anyways, yeah.
I like the Bombers to -5 very much.
9.5. So the Bombers to win by double digits. BC, now again, it's 1, so we'll take it to 0.5 point. Or I guess we can just take money line. Although with the exclusives, I think it makes more sense. I mean, in the unlikely event that it is a tie, I guess that would go to Ottawa. But we'll take Winnipeg 9.5, BC -0.5, And we'll take an extra half point with the Elks to the original line at plus 6.5. I'm just looking at it right now. If I put it in a Coolbet with BC -1 and the Elks +6, along with Bombers -9.5, it's plus 600. So it'll be slightly less than that.
Yeah, I put BC money line instead of the -1, and it's plus 571.
Okay, that's probably where it'll be. Like the half point will be a little bit up. We'll be getting the extra half point with the Elks game, so that if it ends up as a 6-point game, like on the number, we'll win. And as I say, once the boost kicks in, that'll be on the other side of 6 for sure. So, Jake, if you're listening, Bombers -9.5, BC -0.5, Edmonton plus 6.5. We'll get that up. I'm sure the guys will put it up in the combo cards. And it'll be good. We'll have it up for a day, so we can talk about it again tomorrow. People want to bet it. And again, if you want to throw those in with the Riders, plus 1236 just on the spreads. Riders +2, Bombers -9.5, BC -1, Elks +6. I did play that last night as a 4-gamer. Although at the time, again, it was Rough Riders +3 at -112. So my parlay is plus 1170. As I say, you won't get as good a number on Saskatchewan, but the number will be a bit bigger if you want to parlay all those 3 together. But we'll keep the Thursday game off the partner parlay this week and ride with the Bombers, BC, and Elks against the spread. We will have that up in the combo cards a little bit later on. And I got to figure out a play of the day for Jake after a nice run line win for the Royals last night at plus money. Got to keep this rolling as we get into it. Big WST coming up. Brayden Yager, Rutger McGroaty trade. We're going to be all over it. We'll also talk a little more about this Bombers Ticats game with Marshall Ferguson in the Hammer. Maddie, I'll turn it over to you, and you can get ready for the fellas and the rest of the programming on EST. And by the way, special congratulations to my guy, Hernan Salas. What a great announcement that the Hernan is coming back in the building. Man, I was listening to you guys talk about that Tecmo game when he was on the Hangout the other day. I just laughed, but
I brought my trophy into the building today.
You guys are growing, and all systems go to make this the next year bigger and better for EST. Glad to be a part of it. So have a good one today. Good luck to everyone in the bets. The partner parlay will be up later on, but again, it's for the Friday game. If you want to get the Saskatchewan-Toronto game in on it, you can do it. And don't forget your 20% win boost. One bet every single week. I used mine on a Bombers future this week. But, by the way, that Bombers future, which was 7-1 earlier on Monday, 650 when we did the lock shop, plus 6 while we were doing WST, plus 575 the next day. Now it's 5-1. So the Bombers have woken up, and so are Bomber bettors right now, it seems, at Coolbet. Maddie, have a great one. Lock shoppers, enjoy the game tonight. We'll see you tomorrow to get ready for the weekend. I believe Jake and Pat, hopefully both of them, popping in tomorrow for what should be a very, very fun show. We'll see you later.
There we go. My mic's there. I clicked the wrong button, I think, there. And that was Huss. Winnipeg Sports Talk coming up at noon. Just going to wrap up the lock shop momentarily here. But want to remind people, I'm wearing the red shirt. Burgers to Beat MS, A&W today, 16th annual Burgers to Beat MS. $2 from every teen burger, double teen burger, and Beyond Meat teen burger does go towards MS. Edmonton is one of the top fundraising regions in the country for Burgers to Beat MS. We've surpassed $2 million in fundraising, just Edmonton alone. They are looking to raise $2 million here in town, or across the country, I should say, today when it comes to Burgers to Beat MS. And right now until 1:30 at the Windermere location of A&W, 6029 Currents Drive. They have a little bit of a party going on. And Susan, who's the president and CEO of A&W Food Services, and Pamela, who is the president and CEO of MS Canada, they're on site. They were on the Hangout with myself and Jay earlier today. And also the A&W Root Bear and Hunter the Lynx are there. So you can bring your kids and take pictures with them. So yeah, it is Burgers to Beat MS Day here across Canada at A&W. Go pick up your teen burger What better way to support a good cause than crushing some burgers? I couldn't think of a better way to do it. Coming up next, it will be two guys and a goalie, myself, Joaquin Gage, Matt Cassian. We will have some Oilers talk. We'll probably have some FN talk, and we want to hear from you. Parish Jewelers Inbox 780-218-9999. Thanks for tuning into the Lock Shop. Like I said, two guys and a goalie coming up here on your clear choice for Edmonton Sports. Edmonton Sports Talk in just a few minutes.